There are moments in history when courage does not look like a soldier charging across a battlefield. Sometimes, it looks like a woman walking quietly through a crowded street, carrying a small bag in her hands, trying not to attract attention. Sometimes courage is not a weapon, it is a name written on a piece of paper, a child hidden beneath a coat, a whispered promise. And sometimes, it is the decision to keep going when you already know that the world around you is becoming a place where innocent people can disappear. It is 1942. Warsaw, Poland. The Second World War has already changed the city. German soldiers control the streets. Jewish families have been forced into a sealed district known as the Warsaw Ghetto. Behind its walls, hundreds of thousands of people are living in conditions that are almost impossible to imagine. There is hunger, there is disease, there is overcrowding, there is fear, and there are children. Thousands of them. Children who still want to play, children who still ask questions, children who still believe that their parents can protect them. But the world around them is becoming more dangerous every day, and tonight, you are going to enter that world. Before we begin, if you enjoy true historical stories about ordinary people who showed extraordinary courage, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, find a comfortable position, let your shoulders relax, take a slow breath, and allow yourself to settle into the story. Because this is not simply a story about war, it is a story about what one person decided to do when she saw children being placed in terrible danger. You're in Warsaw, the year is 1942, it is cold. The streets outside the ghetto are crowded, but the atmosphere is strangely quiet. People have learned not to look at one another for too long. They have learned to keep walking, to keep their heads down, to avoid attention. The city has become a place where a careless question can be dangerous, a careless word can be dangerous, and sometimes, simply being in the wrong place can be enough. Inside the Warsaw Ghetto, the situation is even worse. The ghetto had been established by the German occupation authorities beginning in 1940. Jewish residents from Warsaw and surrounding areas had been forced into the district. A wall surrounded them. Gates controlled movement. Guards watched the entrances. The population became enormously crowded. Families were squeezed into tiny apartments. Several people might share a single room. Food was severely restricted. People became weak. Children became especially vulnerable. You walk along one of the streets. The first thing you notice is the silence beneath the noise. There are people everywhere. Yet there is no ordinary feeling of city life. No sense that tomorrow will simply arrive and be normal. Instead, everyone seems to be waiting. Waiting for food. Waiting for news. Waiting for a relative to return. Waiting for the next order. Waiting to discover what will happen next. A child stands beside a doorway. He's thin, too thin. His clothes are worn. He watches people passing in the street. Perhaps he is hungry. Perhaps he has not eaten properly for days. Perhaps he's simply watching because there is nothing else to do. You continue walking. A cart passes. Someone carries a sack. A woman speaks quietly with another woman. A man stands near a wall. Everywhere. People are trying to survive, and somewhere among them is a woman named Irina Sendler. She's not a soldier. She does not command an army. She does not have a powerful position. She's a Polish social worker. Her work gives her a reason to enter the ghetto. She can bring assistance, food, medicine, basic supplies. And this access will eventually become one of the most important opportunities she has. Because Irina begins seeing something that she cannot ignore. The children. She sees their faces. She sees how thin they are. She sees mothers trying desperately to protect them. She sees fathers who have no idea how they can keep their families alive. And she understands something terrifying. The children are not simply suffering from hunger. Their entire future is in danger. You stand beside Irina as she looks toward the wall. On the other side is the city. Warsaw continues to exist. People still walk. Buildings still stand. Life continues. But inside the ghetto, time feels different. The wall is more than brick and concrete. It is a boundary between two worlds. One world where people can still imagine tomorrow, and another where tomorrow is becoming uncertain. Irina begins making more frequent visits. She brings what she can, she listens, she learns, and slowly, she begins to understand the scale of the danger. There are rumours. People disappear. Families receive frightening news. The authorities are making plans, but no one yet knows exactly how terrible those plans will become. The uncertainty is almost as frightening as the truth. You hear whispers in the streets, people talking about deportations, people asking where others are being taken, people wondering whether they will ever see their relatives again. And the children, they hear these things too. They may not understand everything, but children understand fear. They see it in their parents' faces. They hear it in their voices. They feel it when adults suddenly stop talking as they enter a room. One evening, Irina returns home. She places her bag down. Her hands are tired. Her clothes smell faintly of the crowded streets. She has seen another child, another family, another mother trying to hold her world together, and perhaps for the first time, a question becomes impossible to ignore. What can one person actually do? The answer seems obvious. Almost nothing. There are too many people, too few resources, too many guards, too many dangers. One woman cannot change a war. She cannot tear down the wall. She cannot defeat the occupying army. But perhaps she can save one child, and then another, and then another. The idea is still small, almost impossibly small compared with the size of the disaster. But sometimes history changes because someone refuses to believe that small actions are meaningless. Outside, Warsaw becomes darker, the streets grow quieter, the ghetto remains behind its walls, and inside it, thousands of children are waiting for a future they cannot see. Irina does not yet know exactly how she will save them. She does not know how many she can reach. She does not know what it will cost, but she has begun to make a decision. If there is a way to get children out, she will try. And that decision will soon place her life directly in the path of one of the most terrifying systems the 20th century had ever created. The wall stands between her and the children, but walls, as history will show, are not always strong enough to stop someone who has decided to cross them. The wall is always there. You see it every time you approach the Warsaw Ghetto. Tall, heavy, unforgiving. It divides one part of the city from another, but it also divides two completely different realities. On one side, ordinary Warsaw continues. On the other, people are struggling simply to remain alive. You walk beside the wall. The winter air is cold against your face. Behind it you can hear movement, carts, footsteps, voices, sometimes crying, sometimes silence. You cannot see everything, but you know there are people behind those walls. Families, grandparents, mothers, fathers, children. And among those children are some who have not eaten properly for days. The Warsaw Ghetto was enormously overcrowded. People had been forced into a restricted area that could not possibly support so many lives. Apartments were packed. Rooms were shared by several families. Food was scarce. Disease spread easily. Typhus became a terrible threat. For children, the situation was especially dangerous. Their bodies were smaller. Their reserves were smaller. A child could become desperately weak much faster than an adult. You enter the ghetto with Irina. She has permission connected to her social work duties. She carries supplies. She moves carefully. Every visit is different. Sometimes people approach her asking for medicine. Sometimes they ask for food. Sometimes they simply want someone to listen. And sometimes they bring their children. You notice the way mothers hold them. Not casually. Not the way a mother might carry a child in an ordinary city. They hold them tightly, almost desperately, as though their arms could somehow become a wall strong enough to protect them. One mother speaks quietly to Irina. Her voice is trembling. She talks about her child. The child is young. Too young to understand why the streets are dangerous, too young to understand why adults whisper, too young to understand why there is not enough food. The mother asks for help. Irina listens. There is no easy answer, no safe answer. At this point, Irina is still trying to provide assistance inside the ghetto. But the situation is changing. The danger is growing. People begin hearing more frightening rumours. There are plans for deportations. People may be transported away. Nobody knows exactly what awaits them. But fear spreads quickly. Families begin asking a terrible question. If the Germans come for us, what happens to our children? You can imagine the silence after that question. Because every parent understands what it means. A child cannot survive alone, but staying inside may also mean death. Leaving the ghetto illegally is extremely dangerous. Outside, a Jewish child who is discovered can be killed. Anyone helping them can be punished. The danger does not end once a child reaches the other side. The child needs somewhere to go, a name, food, shelter, a person willing to hide them, and most importantly, a future. This is where the problem becomes enormous. Saving one child is difficult. Saving many children seems impossible. Yet Irina begins working with people who are willing to help. There are networks of Polish social workers and members of the underground resistance. They understand that something must be done. The question is how? How do you move a frightened child through a guarded ghetto? How do you get past checkpoints? How do you explain a child's presence? How do you keep the child quiet? How do you find a safe place afterward? And what happens if a guard becomes suspicious? Every question has another question behind it. Every solution creates another danger. You stand near one of the gates. German guards are watching. People move through controlled areas. Nobody wants to attract attention. Irina knows that one mistake could be fatal. She also knows that time is running out. Inside the ghetto, children continue becoming weaker. Families continue disappearing. The walls remain. But now the wall seems less like a physical barrier and more like a countdown. Every day that passes may be another day lost. Irina begins thinking beyond simple relief. Food will not be enough. Medicine will not be enough. Something more drastic will be necessary. The children must somehow get out. But asking parents to give up their children may be one of the hardest things imaginable. You enter a small apartment. The room is crowded. A mother is holding her child. The child is quiet. Perhaps he does not understand the conversation. The adult speaks softly. There is fear in every sentence. The mother knows what is happening. She knows that giving up her child may be the only chance of survival. But how do you ask a mother to hand her child to a stranger? How do you promise that the child will be safe when you cannot even promise that you yourself will survive tomorrow? There is no comforting answer, only a terrible choice. Stay together and risk losing everything, or separate and hope that someday they will meet again. Some parents refuse. Of course they do. They cannot imagine letting their children go. Others agree, not because they want to, because they have run out of choices. These are not simple decisions. They are decisions made under terror, and each one leaves a wound. Irina understands this. She does not treat the children as numbers. Each child has a name, a family, a history, a favourite toy, a voice, a mother who loves them, a father who may be desperate to see them again. That is why another problem becomes important. If the children are taken outside, their identities must be protected. They may need new names, new documents, new places to live, but the original identities must not disappear, because if the war ends and the parents survive, there must be a way to find the children again. This thought will eventually lead to one of the most extraordinary parts of Irina's work. Tiny pieces of paper, names, addresses, fragments of information, hidden carefully from the people who would use them to destroy lives, but that comes later. For now, The immediate problem is much simpler. How do you get a child through the wall? You stand with Irina near the edge of the ghetto. She looks toward the street outside. There are guards. There are checkpoints. There are eyes everywhere. She knows the children cannot simply walk out. They need routes. They need disguises. They need people waiting on the other side. And they need luck. A terrifying amount of luck. The first rescue plans begin taking shape. Some children may be carried out. Some may be taken through buildings. Some may be hidden beneath clothing or inside containers. Some may leave through routes connected to the city's underground infrastructure. The methods will vary, because the circumstances will vary, but the goal remains the same. Get the child out, keep the child alive, and never reveal where the others are. You look back toward the ghetto. The wall rises above the street. Behind it, a child is waiting. Perhaps the child does not know it yet. But soon, someone may arrive with a plan that could mean goodbye to everything familiar, a plan that could also mean survival. And perhaps the most painful part is this. For some children, survival will begin with being separated from the people they love most. The wall stands between them and freedom. But another wall is about to appear, a wall inside the human heart. The moment a parent must decide whether to let their child go. And that decision will be harder than crossing any physical wall. The hardest part is not crossing the wall, it is saying goodbye. You're standing inside a small apartment in the Warsaw Ghetto. The room is crowded. The air feels heavy. A mother is holding her child close to her chest. The child is young enough to believe that being held means being safe. He does not understand why the adults are whispering. He does not understand why everyone looks frightened. He does not know that the conversation taking place around him may decide whether he lives. Irina sits quietly nearby. She has seen this before, but no matter how many times it happens, it never becomes easy. The mother looks at her. There are no simple words. No promise can make this safe. Irina can explain what may happen. The child could be taken somewhere outside the ghetto. A Polish family might hide him. A convent or orphanage might shelter him. He might receive a new name. He might have to forget certain things. He might have to pretend to be someone else. And if the war ends, perhaps he will be reunited with his family. Perhaps. That word is the cruelest part. Perhaps. Because nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. The mother looks down at her child. You can see the struggle in her face. Every instinct tells her to hold on, to keep her child beside her, to refuse. But another thought is there too. What if staying means death? What if letting go is the only chance? This is not a choice between good and bad. It is a choice between two terrible possibilities. The child begins to move. The mother holds him tighter. For a moment. She cannot let go. Then she whispers something into his ear. You cannot hear the words. Perhaps she's telling him to be brave. Perhaps she's telling him that she loves him. Perhaps she's telling him that she will come back. Perhaps she does not know whether she's making a promise she can keep. The child looks toward Irina. He does not know her well. To him, she is a stranger, and now, he may have to trust her with his life. Irina reaches out her hand. The child hesitates. Then slowly, he takes it. The mother releases him, and suddenly the room feels enormous. The child is no longer in her arms. Irina begins preparing to leave. The mother follows them toward the door. She does not want to stop. She wants to run after them, but she knows she cannot. The door closes. For a few seconds, there is silence. Then the mother breaks down. You remain outside with Irina. She does not look back immediately. Perhaps she knows that if she does, she will not be able to continue. So she walks, one step, then another. Because somewhere ahead, there is a route out, and behind her, there is a mother who has just made one of the most painful decisions a parent can make. The child walks beside her. He is frightened. He asks where they're going. Irina answers gently. She does not tell him everything. He does not need to know. He only needs to keep walking. The streets are dangerous. Every checkpoint is a threat. Every uniform is frightening. Every unexpected question could end the journey. The child must remain calm, quiet. He must trust the adults around him. But children are children. They cry. They ask for their mother. They ask when they can go home. And sometimes there is no answer that will not hurt. Irina understands that. She does not promise what she cannot guarantee. She simply keeps moving. The rescue network has already prepared places where some children can stay. But getting there is only one part of the problem. The child needs an identity. Outside the ghetto, being recognised as Jewish can be deadly. So the child may need another name, another story, another past. Imagine being a child and suddenly being told that your name is no longer your name, that your family cannot be mentioned, that certain words must never be spoken, that if someone asks where you came from, you must give a different answer. This is not merely hiding, it is an entire new life. And yet, the old life must not be forgotten. That is why Irina and her collaborators begin keeping records, the children's real names, their family information, their new identities, where they have been placed. These details are incredibly dangerous to possess. If the records are discovered, the children could be found, the rescuers could be arrested, the entire network could be destroyed. So the information must be hidden, but it must also survive, because one day the war may end, and if it does, someone will need to answer the question, where are the children? You can imagine the importance of every name. A single name may represent an entire family. A single address may be the only clue connecting a child to a mother who survived. A single piece of paper may one day make a reunion possible. The rescue operation therefore becomes more than moving children. It becomes a race against time. Save them, protect them, remember them, and someday find them again. But for now, there are still more children inside the ghetto, more mothers, more fathers, more impossible decisions. You return with Irina to the crowded streets. A child watches from a doorway. Another sits beside his mother. Someone carries a weak child in his arms. The suffering seems endless. Irina knows she cannot save everyone. That knowledge must be unbearable, but she does not stop. Because perhaps the human mind cannot carry the full weight of a catastrophe. Perhaps the only way to continue is to focus on the person standing directly in front of you. One child, one family, one life, and then the next. The rescue methods become increasingly creative. Children may be carried through hidden passages. Some can be taken out through buildings connected to the outside. Others may be concealed in unexpected places. The exact method depends on the child, the location, the guards, the circumstances. There is no single safe route. There is only improvisation and danger. One day, Irina is preparing to move another child. The child is frightened. He asks about his parents. She looks at him. She cannot tell him that she knows what might happen. She cannot tell him whether his parents will survive. So she gives him something simpler, a reason to keep going. Come with me. The child takes her hand, and they walk. Behind them, the ghetto remains. Ahead, there is uncertainty, but uncertainty is better than the certainty of death. They approach the exit. A guard is nearby. Irina keeps walking. Her face remains calm. Inside, her heart is racing. The child is hidden. The next few seconds feel endless. The guard looks in their direction. You stop breathing. Irina does not. She continues forward. One step, another. The guard turns away, and they pass. The child is out. For a moment, nothing happens. No alarm, no shout, no gunfire. They keep walking. Only after they're safely away does Irina allow herself to breathe normally again. Another child has crossed the wall. Another life has escaped. But behind that wall, thousands remain, and the next rescue will be even more dangerous. because the Germans are tightening their control. The opportunities are shrinking. The danger is increasing, and soon. Irina will have to risk far more than she ever imagined. For now, though, you look at the child beside her. He is alive. He's frightened. He misses his mother, but he is alive. And sometimes, in a world like this, that is everything. The child is outside, but the danger has not ended. In some ways, it has only begun. You walk beside Irina through the streets of Warsaw. The child stays close to her. He is frightened by everything. The unfamiliar buildings, the strangers, the soldiers, the sounds of vehicles moving through the streets. Only a short time ago he knew where home was. He knew his mother's voice. He knew the room where he slept. He knew the faces around him. Now, everything is different. His name may be different. His clothes may be different. His story may be different. And the person holding his hand is someone he barely knows. But Irina keeps walking. She cannot afford to stop. Every minute spent in the open is another minute of danger. The child looks up at her. Perhaps he asks when he will see his mother again. There is no easy answer, so she tells him to be brave. She tells him to remember that people are waiting to help him. And then they continue. The rescue network has to think several steps ahead. Getting a child out of the ghetto is only the beginning. Where will the child sleep? Who will feed him? Who will teach him the new name? Who will make sure he does not accidentally reveal where he came from? Who will protect him if someone asks questions? These are the problems waiting outside the wall. A child cannot simply disappear. Someone must take responsibility. So a hidden network begins to form around the children. Social workers, underground activists, religious institutions, orphanages, convents, private families, ordinary people who understand that helping can cost them their lives. Each person has a role. One person helps arrange documents, another provides shelter, another transports the child, another teaches the child a new identity, another keeps records. The system is fragile. If one person is caught, others may be exposed. If one hiding place is discovered, an entire chain can collapse. And yet, they continue. You enter a small room where a child has just arrived. There are no familiar faces. The child sits quietly. Someone brings food. The child eats quickly. Too quickly. The adults gently tell him to slow down. That small moment tells you everything. Hunger has become normal. Fear has become normal. The child is learning that survival has rules. Eat when food is available. Stay quiet when strangers approach. Do not mention your parents. Do not mention the ghetto. Do not use your old name. Remember your new name. It is an impossible burden for a child. But children are remarkably adaptable. They learn. They imitate. They memorize. They survive. And every time a child learns the new identity, another small piece of the old life becomes hidden. This is why Irina's records become so important. The children may have to forget, but someone must remember. Imagine a small piece of paper. On it, a child's real name, the parents' names, perhaps the child's new name, perhaps the location where the child has been placed. Nothing about it looks extraordinary. It could be mistaken for an ordinary note, but in wartime, it is dangerous. If the Germans find it, the consequences could be terrible, so the information must disappear, but not forever. It must be hidden somewhere safe enough to survive the war. The records become a kind of promise, a promise that these children are not going to become nameless, that their past will not simply vanish, that if their parents survive, someone will try to find them. You watch Irina write. The handwriting is small, careful, deliberate. Another name, another child, another family. She writes because memory can be fragile. People disappear, homes are destroyed, documents are lost, names can be changed, but a written record can survive. She finishes the note, folds it, and hides it. The child is safe for now. But the work continues. There are more children, many more. Some are infants. Some are old enough to understand exactly what is happening. Older children can be particularly difficult to hide. They remember their families. They remember their neighbourhoods. They remember the language of their home. They may accidentally say something that exposes them. So rescuers have to prepare them. Sometimes they teach a child a new story, a new hometown, a new family name, a new religion. Not because the rescuers want to erase the child's identity, but because they are trying to keep the child alive. You can imagine how confusing this must be. A child is told, if someone asks your name, say this. If someone asks where your parents are, say this. If someone asks what you believe, say this. And never mention the people who brought you here. It is a strange kind of education, an education in survival. Outside the hiding places, Warsaw continues. People walk through the streets. German patrols move through neighbourhoods. The war continues. Nobody knows how long it will last. But inside these hidden rooms, something extraordinary is happening. Children are being given another chance. One evening, Irina visits a shelter. A little girl is sitting near a window. She's holding a small object. Perhaps a toy. Perhaps something her mother gave her. Irina sits beside her. The girl asks about home, again. There is no easy answer, so Irina listens. That may be one of the most important things she can offer. Someone is remembering the child. Someone knows where she came from. Someone knows that she had a family. Someone knows her real name. The child is not invisible. The world may have tried to make her invisible, but someone remembers. And sometimes, being remembered is the first step toward being found. The rescue network continues working. Some children are carried, some are hidden, some are taken through buildings, some leave through dangerous routes beneath the city. The methods change according to circumstance. There is no perfect plan, only desperate improvisation. Every rescue has its own risks. Every child has a different story. Every journey is different, and every successful crossing brings a moment of relief. But then, there is another knock at the door, another family, another child, another decision. The work never seems to end. You begin to understand why Irina cannot simply walk away. Because once you save one child, you know there are others waiting. Once you have seen a child survive, it becomes impossible to accept that another child must be abandoned if something can still be done. But the Germans are increasing their control. The ghetto is becoming even more dangerous. Deportations are beginning. The world inside the walls is changing rapidly. Soon, there will be fewer opportunities, fewer exits, fewer chances, and Irina knows it. She looks at the wall again. It is still standing. But now she understands that time is more dangerous than the wall itself. Every day they wait. More children may disappear. So the question becomes urgent. How many can they save? How many can they move? How many can they hide? And how many can they possibly protect? There is no answer. Only the next child, the next door, the next journey, the next risk. Irina takes a breath. Then she turns toward the ghetto again. There are still children inside, and until there are no more chances, she will keep going. The wall is still there, but now, you know that a wall can have more than one way through it. Sometimes the way is obvious, a gate, a doorway, a street. Sometimes it is almost impossible to see. A hidden passage, a basement, a building connected to another building, a vehicle moving through a checkpoint, a moment when a guard looks somewhere else. For the people trying to save children from the Warsaw Ghetto, every possibility matters, because the children cannot simply walk out. They must disappear, and disappearing during Nazi occupation is not easy. You're standing in Warsaw again. The city is grey, the streets are cold, the sound of military vehicles can be heard in the distance. People walk quickly. Nobody wants to stand around unnecessarily. Irina moves with purpose. She knows where she's going. But she also knows that every journey carries risk. A child is waiting. Perhaps the child is hidden beneath a coat. Perhaps the child is being carried. Perhaps the child is waiting in a room behind a door. The exact method changes. The objective does not. Get the child out. Keep the child alive. Do not let anyone discover what is happening. One of the most dangerous parts of the operation is the moment of transition. Inside the ghetto, the child is in one world. Outside, the child enters another. The people helping must somehow cross that boundary. And the guards know the boundary is important. They watch, they question, they search. A person carrying something suspicious can attract attention. A child making the wrong sound can attract attention. A frightened face can attract attention. So every detail matters. You imagine a small child being carried through a crowded area. The child is frightened. The adult carrying him must remain calm. No sudden movements. No panic. No explanation that sounds rehearsed. Just keep walking. A guard looks over. For a moment, everything seems to stop. The child's breathing is quiet. The adult's heart is racing. The guard looks away. They continue. One more step, then another, and finally, Sas, they are through. That moment may last only seconds, but those seconds contain an entire life. Because if the guard had asked one more question, if the child had cried, if someone had become suspicious, the story could have ended differently. There are other routes too. Some children can be moved through buildings connected to the outside. Others can be hidden in places where nobody expects a child to be. Some are transported in vehicles used for legitimate work. The rescue network must constantly adapt. The Germans are searching. The danger changes, so the methods change. You begin to understand something about underground resistance. It rarely looks dramatic. There is no battlefield, no marching army. Often, it looks like ordinary people doing ordinary things while secretly carrying out extraordinary actions. A woman walking down a street, a worker driving a vehicle, a person carrying a bag, a door opening, a message being passed, a name being remembered, and somewhere inside all of this, a child is being given another chance to live. The network depends on trust. One person must trust another. One family must trust a stranger. One rescuer must trust that another person will keep a secret. And everyone understands what happens if that trust breaks. The Nazis have created a system in which helping the persecuted can carry deadly consequences. Fear is everywhere. But so is courage. You enter another small room. A child is waiting. She's holding a little toy. She looks toward the door every time she hears footsteps. She has learned to be afraid of footsteps. That is what war does. It changes ordinary sounds. A knock becomes frightening. A vehicle becomes frightening. A uniform becomes frightening. A sudden silence becomes frightening. Irina sits beside her. She speaks softly. The girl listens. Then Irina explains that they're going somewhere. The child asks, "Where?" Irina tells her she will be safe. It is not a complete answer, but it is the answer the child needs. They prepare to leave. The toy cannot always come with her. The child hesitates. Then she holds it tighter. Perhaps someone decides it can come. Perhaps it must stay behind. Even these small decisions matter, because the child is leaving almost everything familiar. A home, a room, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a language, a neighbourhood, a life. The rescue may save the child's body, but it cannot immediately save the child from grief. That grief travels with them. You walk with Irina and the child. The city outside feels enormous. The child stays close. There is a checkpoint ahead. You can hear German voices. The adult carrying the child must remain calm. The child must remain quiet. They approach. A guard looks at them. For a moment, you think he will stop them. He asks a question. The answer comes quickly. The guard looks again, then gestures for them to continue. They walk. You do not breathe until the checkpoint is behind you. The child is still alive. Another rescue has succeeded, but there is no celebration. No cheering. No applause. The people involved know that there are still thousands of children in danger. They simply move the child to safety, then prepare for the next one. That is how the work grows. One child, then another, then another. Soon the number becomes difficult to imagine. Hundreds, eventually thousands. But each child is still one child, one face, one story, one life. And that is why the records matter so much. Imagine trying to remember hundreds of names during a war. It would be impossible, so Irina and her collaborators record them. Carefully, quietly. The names are written on small pieces of paper. The information is organised. Then the records are hidden. Not in a place that seems important. Somewhere ordinary. Somewhere people would not immediately search. The papers become a secret archive of lives. If the war ends, these names may become the key to reunions. If the records survive, families may someday find their children. If the records are destroyed, some children may become permanently disconnected from their past. So the papers must survive, but they must also remain hidden. It is a delicate balance. Too visible, and they are dangerous. Too well hidden, and they might never be found. The rescuers take the risk anyway, because they are thinking beyond tomorrow. They are thinking about a time when the war might finally end, a time when the walls might come down, a time when children might ask, "Who am I? Where is my family? What was my real name?" And someone needs to be able to answer. You look again toward the ghetto. The wall is still standing, but the rescue network has already crossed it many times. Not with armies, not with weapons, with courage, with secrecy, with ordinary people who refuse to accept that children must disappear simply because a government has decided they do not deserve to live. But the situation is becoming more dangerous. The German authorities are tightening their control. More people are being deported. More families are disappearing. The windows of opportunity are closing. Irina knows that. She also knows something else. The more children they save, the greater the danger becomes. Every additional rescue creates another secret, another hiding place, another person who knows something, another opportunity for the network to be exposed, and eventually, someone will make a mistake, or someone will betray them, or the Germans will discover the pattern. The question is not whether the danger will come, it is when. You watch Irina prepare for another journey. She checks what she's carrying. She looks toward the street. Then she steps forward. The city is cold. The wall is waiting, and somewhere behind it, another child is waiting too. A child who does not know that tonight. Someone is coming for them. The child is finally outside the ghetto. But freedom does not immediately feel like freedom. You walk beside the little girl through the streets of Warsaw. She keeps looking behind her. Perhaps she expects to see her mother. Perhaps she's wondering whether someone is following. Perhaps she's simply trying to understand why everything looks unfamiliar. The buildings are different. The streets are different. The voices are different. And most importantly, her name is different. That is one of the strangest parts of being rescued. The child has escaped one identity, but must now live under another. It is not because her old identity has become unimportant. Quite the opposite. Her old identity is so dangerous that it must be hidden. A new name may keep her alive. A new story may protect her. A new family may give her somewhere to sleep. But somewhere beneath all of that, the old child still exists. The child who remembers her mother. The child who remembers her home. The child who remembers a different name. You enter a small room where the child will stay. There is a bed, a table, a few simple belongings. Perhaps someone has prepared food. It looks ordinary. But nothing about this moment is ordinary. The child has just entered a completely different life. An adult explains the new name. The child repeats it, again and again, until the unfamiliar sound begins to feel familiar. She is taught what to say if someone asks questions, where she came from, who her parents are, what religion she practices, what her family name is. The answers must be remembered, because a single mistake could expose her. Imagine being 5 or 6 years old and having to memorize a false identity in order to survive. You might be frightened, you might forget, you might accidentally say your real name, you might suddenly cry for your mother, and the people caring for you must somehow calm you without revealing the truth. Sometimes the children are placed with Polish families, sometimes with religious institutions, sometimes in orphanages or convents. The locations vary. The danger remains. Everyone involved understands that hiding a Jewish child under Nazi occupation is an enormous risk. The rescuers are not simply protecting a child from being discovered. They are protecting themselves too. If a hiding place is exposed, the consequences can reach everyone, so secrecy becomes part of everyday life. Doors remain closed, names are whispered, visitors are watched carefully, children are taught what they must never say. The child begins learning a new routine. Wake up, eat, study, stay quiet. Remember the name. Do not ask too many questions. Do not talk about the ghetto. Do not mention your parents. And perhaps, do not cry when you miss them. But children cannot simply turn off their memories. At night the little girl lies in bed. The room is dark. She closes her eyes, and suddenly she remembers home, her mother's voice, her father's hands, the smell of the room, a toy, a song, a face. She whispers her real name, only once, so quietly that nobody else hears. Then she stops, because she remembers. She has to use the new name. This is the hidden tragedy of rescue. The child survives, but survival comes with loss. The rescuers know this. Irina knows this. That is why she wants the children's real identities preserved, not merely as records, as a promise. The children must not become strangers to themselves. One day, if the war ends, they may need to know who they really are. So the records continue. A child's name, the parents, the original address, the new name, the place where the child has been hidden. Each detail is written down. Each detail is precious, but also dangerous. If someone finds the list, the entire network could be exposed, so the records must be hidden carefully. Imagine the responsibility. You're holding information about hundreds of children. If you lose it, families may never find one another. If someone discovers it, people may die. The papers become almost as important as the children themselves. They carry the children's past. They carry the possibility of a future reunion. But the war is not waiting. Outside, German control grows harsher. The situation in Warsaw becomes increasingly desperate. People are being deported. Families are disappearing. The ghetto is becoming a place from which fewer and fewer people can escape. That means the rescue work must move faster. More children need help. More hiding places are needed. More people must be trusted. And every new person creates another risk. You watch Irina return to the network. Someone gives her information about another child. A family is considering sending the child out. The parents are afraid. They don't know whether to trust anyone. They ask the question every parent asks. Will my child really be safe? Nobody can guarantee it. But Irina tells them that they will do everything possible. Sometimes, that is all anyone can offer. The mother holds her child. The father stands beside them. The child looks confused. Perhaps the child thinks they are going somewhere, temporarily. Perhaps they think they will return home later. The adults know better. This may be goodbye. And once again, a child is handed over. Irina takes the child's hand. They leave. The door closes behind them. Another family waits. Another goodbye. Another rescue. You begin to understand the scale of what is happening. This is not one dramatic rescue. It is hundreds of small acts of courage, repeated again and again and again. Every successful child creates a little hope. Every failure creates another wound. And yet, the work continues. Some children adapt quickly. Others struggle. Some remember everything. Others remember very little. Some may eventually forget their original names. That possibility terrifies the people keeping the records, because a child can survive physically while becoming disconnected from the person they once were. The hidden list becomes a way of protecting memory. A child may forget. Paper may remember. A family may disappear. A name may remain. A home may be destroyed. An address may survive. And perhaps, one day, the war will end. Perhaps the walls will come down. Perhaps the soldiers will leave. Perhaps the children will be able to return. That hope is fragile, but it is enough to keep writing. You imagine Irina late at night. The city is quiet. She sits with a small piece of paper. A name is written on it. She reads it carefully. Then another name, and another. Hundreds of children. Hundreds of lives. She knows that these are not numbers. Each name belongs to someone who has a mother, a father, a story, a past. She folds the paper, hides it, and moves on to the next task, because morning will come, and there will be another child, another family, another impossible decision. But the danger is getting closer. The network is growing. The number of children being helped is growing. And the Nazi authorities are becoming increasingly suspicious. Soon, the people helping these children will face a new threat. Someone may be watching. Someone may be asking questions. And if the Germans discover what Irina and her collaborators are doing, the children will not be the only ones in danger. The people saving them will be hunted too. The next chapter will begin when the shadow of that danger finally reaches Irina herself. And when it does, she will have to decide how much she's willing to risk. Not for one child, not for 10, but for every child whose name she has promised to remember. The names must survive. That is what matters now. The children are being moved from one place to another. Some are hidden with families. Some are taken into orphanages. Some are sheltered by religious communities. Their lives are changing. Their names are changing. Their stories are changing. But somewhere, their real identities must remain. Because Irina understands something that is easy to overlook. Saving a child is only half the task. The other half is making sure the child can someday find the way back to who they were. You're sitting in a quiet room in Warsaw. The curtains are drawn. Outside, the city continues under German occupation. Inside, there is almost no sound. A small piece of paper lies on the table. On it is a name, not a number, not a code. A name. The name of a child who once lived with a family. A child whose parents may be alive, or may already be gone. Nobody knows. Beside the name is information about the child's new identity. Where the child has been taken. Who is caring for them. The details are written carefully. Then the paper is folded. But it cannot simply be placed in a drawer. It must disappear. Because if German authorities discover these records, they could uncover the network. They could find the children. They could arrest the people helping them. So the papers need a hiding place. A place ordinary enough to escape suspicion. A place that can survive the war. The solution is remarkably simple. Glass jars. Small containers that can be sealed and hidden underground. The children's names and information can be placed inside. Then the jars can be buried. Not where someone would expect a secret archive to be, but somewhere that looks ordinary. Somewhere beneath the ground. You imagine the scene. A quiet courtyard. Cold earth. A person kneeling with a small shovel. The jar is held carefully. Inside are names. Hundreds of lives reduced to tiny pieces of paper. The person lowers the jar into the ground. Soil covers it. The surface becomes ordinary again. No sign remains. A passerby would see nothing, just earth. But underneath, a secret history is waiting. The idea is extraordinary. The children may have to forget. The world may forget. But the names will remain. You think about what those names represent. One might belong to a little boy who loves drawing, another to a girl who misses her mother, another to a baby whose parents never had the chance to explain what was happening. Each name represents a family, a home, a life interrupted by war. And now, each name is hidden beneath the ground, waiting. The records are not simply a list. They are a promise. If the war ends, we will remember. If the parents survive, we will search. If the children ask who they were, we will have an answer. But that promise is dangerous. The Nazi authorities are tightening their grip. The people helping Jewish families are constantly at risk. One person caught with the wrong document can expose another. One careless conversation can destroy an entire network. One frightened person can reveal a hiding place. Trust has become a matter of life and death. You walk with Irina through Warsaw. She appears calm, but she understands the danger. She has learned to live with fear. Fear does not disappear. You simply learn how to carry it. She enters the ghetto again. The streets are crowded. Children stand near buildings. Adults move quickly. Some faces are familiar. Others are new. Irina listens. Someone tells her about another child. A family wants help. The child is young. The parents are terrified. Irina knows what they are asking. They want her to take their child. And once again, she must face the terrible conversation. There is no safe option. If the child stays, the danger is enormous. If the child leaves, the family may never see them again. The mother asks where the child will go. Irina explains that there are people prepared to hide them. The mother asks whether the child will be safe. Irina cannot promise certainty. Nobody can. The mother looks at her child. The child is holding her hand. The mother squeezes it. Perhaps she's trying to memorize the feeling, the shape of those little fingers, the warmth, the weight. Because if she lets go, she may never touch them again. Eventually, the decision is made. The child will leave. The mother kisses the child, then again. The child asks when she will return. The mother cannot answer. Irina takes the child. They walk away. Behind them, the mother remains standing. She watches until they disappear. You feel the weight of that moment. The rescue is successful, but success does not mean happiness. Sometimes, survival begins with heartbreak. Outside the ghetto, the child receives another name. The new name is repeated, again, until the child remembers it. Then the child is taken to a safe place, and the real name is written down, folded, hidden, saved. Another name for the jar, another life preserved. The number grows. One child, then 10, then dozens, then hundreds. The work becomes larger than anyone could have imagined. But Irina continues to see each child individually. That is important, because large numbers can become meaningless. 2,000 children sounds like a number, but 2,000 individual children means 2,000 faces, 2,000 frightened voices, 2,000 families, 2,000 stories, 2,000 futures, and each one depends on someone remembering. You imagine the jars beneath the ground. They are silent. Nobody can hear them. Nobody knows they are there. But inside them, the children have names. The world may be burning above them. The war may destroy buildings. People may disappear. Borders may change. But the names are waiting. Waiting for another time. Waiting for someone to uncover them. Waiting for the children to grow old enough to ask, who was I? Where did I come from? Who are my parents? And perhaps someone will be able to answer. The rescue work continues, but the danger is getting closer. There are whispers of arrests. People are being questioned. Underground networks are being hunted. Irina knows that the authorities are becoming increasingly suspicious. She understands that eventually, someone may discover what she is doing, and when that happens, the jars will not be the only thing at risk. Her own life will be at risk. The lives of her collaborators will be at risk. And most importantly, the children will be at risk. She knows this. Yet she keeps going. Perhaps because she has already crossed a point from which there is no easy return. Once you know, you cannot pretend you don't know. Once you have seen a child in danger, you cannot simply walk away. So she returns again. Another street, another building, another frightened family, another child, another name, another piece of paper, and somewhere beneath the ground, another secret is waiting. The jars remain hidden, but the people who created them are becoming exposed. The net around Irina is tightening, and soon the quiet work of saving children will collide directly with the machinery of the Nazi police. The next time someone knocks on the door, it will not be a frightened parent asking for help. It will be the Gestapo, and Irina will discover exactly how much courage she has. The work has become larger. More children are being moved. More names are being recorded. More people are involved. And with every child rescued, the danger grows. You can feel it in Warsaw. Something has changed. People are looking over their shoulders more often. Conversations become quieter when strangers approach. Doors are opened only after someone checks who is outside. The underground network is still moving, but the German authorities are watching. The city has become a place where secrecy is not simply useful. It is necessary for survival. Irina knows this. She has known it for a long time. But knowing that danger exists, and knowing that the danger is coming for you, are two different things. Inside the ghetto, conditions are becoming increasingly desperate. Families are disappearing. People are being deported. The fear is no longer based only on rumours. The reality is becoming impossible to ignore. Children who were once running through crowded streets are disappearing. Rooms that were once full become empty. A mother looks for a child who is no longer there. A father asks where his family has been taken. There are fewer answers every day. And Irina keeps returning. She enters the ghetto whenever she can. She listens. She helps. She searches for children who can still be moved. But the window is closing. The Germans have increased their control. Every entrance and exit is watched more carefully. Every person crossing a checkpoint is a potential target. The methods that worked before may no longer work tomorrow, so the rescuers adapt. They change routes. They change meeting places. They change explanations. They change identities. The only thing that does not change is the goal. Get the children out. You enter a small room again. A family is waiting. The father is standing near the window. The mother is holding her child. Nobody speaks for a moment. They already know what they're going to discuss. The child must leave. The father asks how long it will take. Nobody knows. The mother asks where the child will go. Someone explains. The child will be taken somewhere safe. A new identity will be prepared. Someone will care for them. The mother listens. Then she asks the question that has no good answer. Will I see my child again? Silence. Irina looks at her. She cannot promise. The war has made promises dangerous, so she says only what she can honestly say. They will do everything possible. The mother nods. She knows. The child is taken. Another goodbye. Another secret. Another name. Another journey. But this time, something feels different. Perhaps it is the silence. Perhaps it is the growing number of arrests. Perhaps it is simply instinct. The feeling that someone is watching. Irina leaves the building. She walks through the street. A German patrol passes. She keeps her face calm. She does not look back, but inside. She knows the danger is getting closer. The underground network depends on people remaining silent. Everyone knows what is at stake. If one person talks, many may die. So they communicate carefully, sometimes through messages, sometimes through trusted intermediaries, sometimes without words at all. A particular look, a gesture, a location, a time. The system has to work without attracting attention, and somehow it does. Children continue to disappear from the ghetto, not because they are being taken away by the Germans, but because someone is saving them. The number grows. Hundreds of children, each one moved through danger, each one given another identity, each one connected to a hidden record, and somewhere beneath the ground, the jars remain. But Irina cannot think only about the future. She must survive the present. Every day she enters dangerous areas. Every day she carries information. Every day she meets people who could be under surveillance. Eventually, someone notices. Perhaps it begins with a question. Why does this woman enter the ghetto so often? Why does she know so many families? Why does she appear at certain places? Why are children disappearing? The German authorities have many ways of gathering information. They use informants, interrogations, surveillance, arrests, fear. The occupation creates an atmosphere where anyone can become a source of information. The network knows this, but they cannot simply stop, because stopping means leaving children behind. You imagine the conversation among the rescuers. Should they continue? Should they reduce the number of children? Should they change the routes? Should they stop temporarily? Every option is dangerous, but one thing is certain: the Germans are getting closer. Irina continues working. She helps another child, then another. The routine becomes almost unbearable. There is no time to celebrate. A successful rescue simply creates space for the next emergency. You begin to see how courage actually works. It is not always a dramatic moment. Sometimes courage is repetition, doing the dangerous thing again and again and again, even when you are tired, even when you are afraid, even when you know you may eventually be caught. Irina keeps returning, and then, one night, the warning comes. Someone has been arrested. The network is compromised. The Germans may be searching for people involved. Irina hears the news. She understands immediately. The danger is no longer distant. It is here. She looks at the information she's carrying: names, locations, children. She knows what would happen if those details fell into German hands. The children could be found. The people hiding them could be arrested. The entire network could collapse. So the records must remain hidden. And Irina must remain silent. The next day, she continues, because there is still another child. But the city feels different now. The streets seem narrower. The footsteps behind her seem louder. Every uniform draws her attention. Every knock makes her heart beat faster. And then, the moment she has feared finally arrives. The door opens. German officers are standing outside. For a second, nobody moves. Irina looks at them. They look at her. The secret work she's been carrying out for so long has finally been discovered. She's arrested. The children are still hidden. The names are still buried. The network is still alive. But Irina is now in the hands of the Gestapo, and the Germans have questions. Many questions. They want names. They want addresses. They want to know where the children are. They want to know who helped them, and they expect her to answer. But Irina knows something they do not. She has already decided what she will do. She will say nothing, because somewhere in Warsaw, children are sleeping under names that are not their own, and their lives now depend on one woman keeping a secret. The door closes behind her. The footsteps of the officers disappear down the corridor. Irina is alone. For the first time, she's no longer the person moving through the shadows. She's the prisoner. And now, the real test begins. The door closes, the footsteps disappear, and suddenly, Irina is alone. A short time ago, she was moving through Warsaw with a child beside her. Now she's a prisoner. The room is cold. The walls are bare. There is nowhere to hide. No secret passage. No underground network. No friendly door waiting to open. Only questions. And the people asking them already know that fear can make people talk. They want names. They want addresses. They want information about the children. They want to know who helped her. They want to know where the children were taken. And perhaps most importantly, they want to know where the records are. Because if they can find those records, they can begin pulling apart the entire network. One name can lead to another. One address can lead to another. One child can lead to a family. One family can lead to the people who helped them. The entire operation could collapse. Irina understands this immediately, so she says nothing. You can imagine the first questions. Who are your collaborators? Where are the children? Who gave you the documents? Where did you take the children? Who is hiding them? She listens. She answers carefully, but she does not give them what they want. The interrogation becomes more aggressive. They try intimidation. They try threats. They try to make her believe that cooperation is the only way to survive. But Irina knows that speaking could cost other people their lives, and so she remains silent. Outside that room, the children are still hidden. Some are sleeping, some are being cared for, some may be frightened. They do not know that the woman who helped them is now sitting inside a German prison. They do not know that their names are being demanded. They do not know how close the danger has become. But the people in the underground network do, and they understand something else. If Irina talks, everything could be lost. The interrogation continues. Hours pass, perhaps days. Time becomes difficult to measure. A prisoner does not control the clock. You wait, you listen. Footsteps in the corridor, a door opening somewhere, a voice, then silence. The mind begins to fill the silence with possibilities. What happened to the children? Did anyone find them? Did someone betray the network? Are the records safe? Are the people helping them safe? Irina cannot know, but she can control one thing, what she says, and she chooses silence. The Germans become frustrated. They want answers. She gives them none. The pressure increases. She is beaten. She is threatened. She is told that she may be killed. But even under terrible treatment, she refuses to reveal the children's locations. Imagine the strength required for that. She is not protecting herself. She is protecting people she may never see again. Children whose names she knows. Children whose faces she remembers. Children who may not even know her name. The interrogators have power over her body, but they cannot make her willingly give them the information. That decision belongs to her, and she holds on to it. Meanwhile, the underground network is trying to respond. They know that the Gestapo will not simply stop. They may search homes. They may question associates. They may watch known locations. The rescue operation must become even more secretive. The children must be moved if necessary. The records must remain hidden. And somehow, Irina must be saved. Because if she is executed, she may take the secrets with her. But the network does not yet know whether they can reach her. You imagine the people discussing it quietly. There is no easy plan. The Germans control the city. The prison is guarded. Any attempt to interfere could result in arrests. Yet doing nothing could mean losing Irina. And perhaps the children too. Then the worst possibility appears. Execution. Irina is sentenced to death. The words are devastating. She knows what they mean. There may be no tomorrow, no second chance, no opportunity to continue helping. She may never know what happened to the children. She may never see the people she worked with again. She may never walk through Warsaw freely. She may never return home. For a moment, the entire future seems to disappear. But she still keeps the secret. The names remain hidden. The children remain hidden. The network remains protected. The sentence is carried out, or at least that is what the Germans intend. But outside the prison, people are working desperately. The underground organization begins trying to arrange her escape. They need money, they need contacts, they need someone willing to take enormous risks. then they need time. Every hour matters, because the date of her execution is approaching. The people trying to save her know that they may fail, but they cannot simply accept her death. Not after everything she has done, not after so many children have already been rescued. A plan begins to form. It is dangerous. It depends on bribery. It depends on people inside the German system being willing to cooperate. It depends on timing. And most of all, it depends on secrecy. If the Germans discover the plan, Irina could be killed immediately. The people helping her could be arrested. The children could become vulnerable, so everyone must remain silent. You imagine Warsaw that night. The city is dark. German patrols move through the streets. Somewhere inside a prison, Irina waits. She does not know whether anyone is coming. Perhaps she has accepted that she will die. Perhaps she's thinking about the children. Perhaps she's thinking about the mothers who trusted her. Perhaps she's thinking about the names buried beneath the ground. Tiny pieces of paper, hundreds of children, a promise. She may never see them again. But perhaps, somewhere outside, someone is still trying. The night grows deeper. A guard walks down the corridor. A door opens. Irina looks up. For a moment, she does not know what is happening. Then someone speaks quietly. The plan has worked. She is being released. Not officially. Not through a normal legal process. She has been saved through the underground network's desperate efforts. Her life has been spared. But the danger is not over. She cannot return to ordinary life. The Germans believe she may still be a threat. Her name is dangerous. Her movements must remain hidden, and the work must continue. Irina walks back into the streets. The city looks almost the same, but she is different. She has been arrested. She has been tortured. She has been sentenced to death. And yet, she survived. She knows what could have happened. She knows how close the children came to losing their protector. So she does not stop. Because somewhere in Warsaw, there are children who still need help. And somewhere beneath the earth, there are jars containing their real names. The secrets survived. Irina survived. Now the war must continue, and so must the rescue. But the future will bring another kind of pain. The war will eventually end. The walls will come down. The soldiers will leave. And then, the children will have to discover what happened to their families. That reunion will not always be happy, because sometimes survival means discovering that the people you were hoping to return to are no longer there. The door is opened. Irina is free, but freedom does not mean safety. She steps back into the streets of Warsaw carrying something invisible with her. The memory of the prison, the questions, the beatings, the threats, and above all, the knowledge that the people who arrested her may still be looking for her. She cannot simply return to the life she had before. She must remain careful. She must disappear into the underground. And yet, there are still children. That fact has not changed. While Irina was imprisoned, the world inside the ghetto continued to collapse. Families were being torn apart. People were being deported. Children were disappearing. The rescue network had been forced to operate under even greater pressure. And now Irina has returned. There is no celebration, no time for rest. Someone tells her about another child. She listens. The child needs somewhere to go. Irina closes her eyes for a moment. She's exhausted, but she nods. Another child, another journey, another risk. You begin to understand the strange rhythm of courage. A person can be terrified and still continue. Fear does not disappear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Sometimes it is simply deciding that something else matters more. For Irina, the children matter more. She returns to the work. The methods are becoming more difficult. German patrols are everywhere. The ghetto is under terrible pressure. People who once had homes and ordinary lives are now fighting for basic survival. Children are especially vulnerable. Some are already separated from their parents. Others are being hidden. Some are waiting for a chance to escape. The rescue network tries to reach as many as possible, but there is a painful limit. They cannot save everyone. Irina knows this. Every rescuer knows this. That knowledge must be one of the heaviest burdens they carry. Imagine walking through a street and seeing a frightened child. You know you may be able to save one, but there are 10 more, or 100, or thousands. How do you choose? There is no answer that feels fair. Sometimes the decision depends on age, sometimes on health, sometimes on whether a hiding place is available, sometimes simply on whether an opportunity appears. History is full of moments when people are forced to make impossible choices. This is one of them. Irina keeps working anyway. She meets another family. The parents understand what she's offering. Their child may have a chance outside. The mother holds the child. The father looks away. Nobody wants to say goodbye. But eventually, the mother places the child into Irina's arms. This time, the child is very small, too young to understand why the world has changed. The child does not know that the mother may never see them again. The child only knows that the person holding them is not their mother. They begin to cry. Irina holds them close. She cannot explain the war. She cannot explain why this is happening. She can only carry them. Outside, the streets are dangerous. She moves quickly. The child slowly becomes quieter. Perhaps exhaustion takes over. Perhaps the warmth of her arms is enough. She reaches the next safe location. The child is taken inside. Another life has been moved. Another name is written. Another record is prepared. Another piece of paper joins the hidden collection. And somewhere, another mother waits. You can almost imagine her standing by a window, looking toward the street, wondering whether her child is alive. She has no way to know. There is no telephone call, no letter, no message. The war has made communication almost impossible. The only thing she can do is hope, and hope can be painful, because hope keeps you waiting. Days become weeks, weeks become months. The children continue growing. Even in hiding, time continues. A baby becomes a toddler. A little girl becomes a schoolchild. A boy learns his new name. They begin forming new memories. Some memories of their old lives become blurred. This is one of the tragedies Irina understands. A child can survive, but memory can fade. That is why the records matter. The names are a bridge between the child they were and the person they will become. You return to the hidden papers. There are more now, more names, more families, more locations. The collection represents a secret map of survival, but it is also a map of loss. Some names will eventually lead to reunions, others will lead to silence, because the war is killing parents, killing grandparents, destroying families. The rescuers cannot control that. They can only protect the children they can reach, and so they continue. Meanwhile, the Nazi persecution grows more brutal. The Warsaw Ghetto is becoming a place of enormous suffering. People are being deported to camps. The streets become quieter. Buildings become emptier. The number of people who can still be rescued shrinks. Every opportunity becomes precious. One evening, Irina receives news that a route may be available. There is a child who can be moved. She prepares immediately. No unnecessary questions, no delay. The child is brought to her. They begin walking. The child looks frightened. Irina takes their hand. They approach a dangerous area. German soldiers are nearby. She keeps walking. The child stays close. Nobody speaks. They pass. Again. The impossible happens. They survive. The child reaches safety. Irina breathes out. Then she looks back. The street is still there. The soldiers are still there. The war is still there. But the child is alive. and that is enough to continue. Years later, people will talk about numbers. They will say thousands of children were rescued. They will try to understand the scale, but numbers can hide the emotional truth. The truth is, each rescue began with one frightened child, one parent, one goodbye, one person willing to take the risk. And that is why the story is so powerful. It is not really about numbers, it is about choices. Again and again, people had to choose, help or look away, risk or remain safe, remember or allow someone to disappear. Irina chose to remember. She chose to act, and she paid a terrible price: her freedom, her safety, her health, her peace. But she continued. The war, however, is still far from over. The children remain hidden, the names remain buried, the families remain separated, and the future is uncertain. Then, the great violence of the war begins moving toward its final years. The German occupation will eventually collapse. The walls will eventually fall. But when that happens, the children will face another question. Where are their parents? Who survived? Who did not? And can the old life ever be recovered? Irina knows the answer will not always be what the children hope for. Some will find family. Some will find relatives. Some will discover that nobody they remember survived. Some will have no home to return to. That is the price of surviving a catastrophe. You escape death, but you may have to live with what death left behind. For now, though, the rescue continues. The children sleep. The hidden names remain safe. The underground network keeps moving, and Irina keeps walking, one street at a time, one child at a time, one secret at a time. The war has not yet ended, but history is already carrying these children toward a future they cannot imagine, a future in which they will grow older, a future in which they will ask questions, a future in which someone will finally uncover the hidden names, and when that day comes, some children will learn that the person they thought had disappeared forever was still waiting for them, and others will learn something much harder, that the person they were waiting for had never survived the war. But before that future arrives, there is still more suffering ahead, and Warsaw is moving toward one of the darkest moments of the entire war. The war is still raging, but somewhere beyond the smoke, the future is beginning to change. For the children hidden across Warsaw, however, there is no way to know that. They wake each morning beneath assumed names. They eat food provided by strangers. They learn new routines. They try to remember what they have been told, and sometimes they simply wait. Waiting becomes part of childhood. Waiting for food, waiting for news, waiting for the war to end, waiting for a mother who may never return. You walk through Warsaw. The city looks exhausted. Buildings bear the marks of war. Streets that once carried ordinary life have become places of fear. The German occupation has transformed everything, but the people resisting are still there. Irina is still working. The network is still protecting children. The hidden records are still buried, and every child who remains alive is a small victory against a system designed to erase them. But the situation is changing rapidly. The Nazi regime is beginning to lose the war. The German armies are under increasing pressure. The Soviet forces are advancing from the east. The occupation that once seemed permanent is beginning to crack. But for Warsaw, the ending will not be simple. In 1944, the city rises against German occupation in the Warsaw Uprising. For weeks, Warsaw becomes a battlefield. Fighting erupts through the streets. Buildings are destroyed. Civilians are trapped. The city suffers enormous devastation. And once again, children are caught in the middle. The people who have survived years of occupation now face another wave of destruction. You hear explosions, gunfire, people running through streets. Smoke fills the sky. The city that had already suffered so much is being torn apart again. For those protecting children, the priority becomes survival. Move them, hide them, keep them away from the fighting. But now there are fewer safe places. The war has reached the streets themselves. The underground network has to adapt once again. Some children are moved, others remain hidden. Some shelters become unsafe. New ones must be found. The work that began as secret rescues from the ghetto has now become a struggle to keep survivors alive through the final stages of the war. And still, the names remain. The jars remain hidden. The records are waiting. You can imagine how strange it must feel. For years, the future has seemed impossible. But now, people are beginning to whisper that the Germans may actually leave, that the war may end, that the walls may finally come down. For the children, this should be good news. But what does freedom mean when you no longer know where home is? That question will soon become painfully important. A child who was rescued years earlier may now be old enough to understand what happened. They may remember their mother. They may remember a doorway, a street, a toy, a voice. But they may not know whether those memories belong to a world that still exists. The war has taken more than lives. It has taken certainty. It has taken childhood. It has taken families. And it has scattered people across an entire continent. You imagine a little girl sitting quietly in a room. Someone tells her that the Germans are losing, she asks. Does that mean I can go home? The adult hesitates, because the answer is complicated. The Germans may be leaving. But where is home? Who is waiting there? Does the old apartment still exist? Is her mother alive? Is her father alive? Are her brothers and sisters alive? Nobody knows. This is the terrible uncertainty waiting at the end of the war. The rescue workers have spent years trying to save children from death. Soon, they will have to help survivors understand what happened to the lives they left behind. Irina knows that the hidden records will become crucial. The jars contain information about the children, but information alone cannot bring people back. The records can tell you where a child was born, who the parents were, where the child was taken, but they cannot tell you whether the family survived. That question belongs to the future. For now, the war continues. The Warsaw Uprising is crushed. The Germans destroy much of the city. People are expelled. Buildings burn. The streets become almost unrecognizable. And then, the German occupation finally begins to collapse. The Soviet army advances. German forces retreat. Warsaw is eventually liberated in January 1945. The occupation is ending. After nearly 6 years of war, the city is free of German rule. But freedom does not feel like celebration. Not yet. There is too much destruction, too much grief, too many empty homes, too many missing people. You walk through the streets. A building that once held a family is gone. A shop is gone, a school is damaged, a street looks familiar, but somehow completely different. And somewhere among the survivors, there are children. Children who lived because someone hid them. Children who lived because someone carried them through danger. Children who lived because someone remembered their names. Now, the question becomes, where are they? The rescue workers begin searching. The hidden records become more important than ever. The jars are recovered. The pieces of paper are opened. Names begin appearing again, one after another. A child who had been given a new identity now has an old identity again. A family name, a birthplace, a connection to the past. The records become a map of lives that were almost erased. But the discoveries are painful. Some families are found, others are not. Some parents survived. Many did not. Some children can be reunited with relatives. Others discover that the people they loved are gone. There is no perfect ending. There cannot be. The Holocaust has destroyed too much. Millions of Jewish people were murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. Warsaw's Jewish community was devastated. The children who survived represent only a small fraction of those who were lost. And yet, each survivor matters. Every life matters. Every name matters. You look at the recovered papers, tiny pieces of writing, names written during the darkest years, names that survived. The war tried to erase these people, but someone wrote them down, someone remembered, and now history can remember too. Irina looks at the names. She knows the work is not finished. Saving children was only the beginning. Now comes the search, the reunions, the painful discoveries, the questions, the stories, the memories. The war has ended. But for these children, the consequences will last their entire lives. And perhaps that is one of the hardest truths about survival. A war can end in a day, but the life left behind by the war continues for decades. The children will grow older. They will build families of their own. They will carry memories. Some will speak. Some will remain silent. Some will spend their lives wondering about the people they lost. But they are alive. And that is because, when the world around them was collapsing, someone decided their lives were worth the risk. The wall is gone. The guards are gone. The ghetto is gone. But the memories remain. And now, the children must begin the long journey of discovering who they really are. The war is over. But for Irina, the work is not. The German soldiers are leaving. The walls of the ghetto are no longer holding people inside. The streets are changing. But one question remains. Where are the children? For years their names were hidden. Their identities were changed. Their families were separated. Now the people who survived must begin searching for one another. You walk through Warsaw after the war. The city is almost unrecognizable. Buildings have been destroyed. Streets are filled with rubble. Homes that once held families are empty. Some doors still stand, but there is no one behind them. And among these ruins, people are searching. They carry photographs, old documents, names written on scraps of paper, memories. They ask strangers questions. Have you seen this person? Do you know this family? Did anyone survive? Every answer matters, and every unanswered question hurts. Irina and the people who worked with her now turn toward the hidden records. The jars are opened, the papers are carefully removed. One by one, the names return to the light. For years, these names had been hidden underground. Now, they can finally be read. A child who had been known by another name has an old name again. A family that had been separated has a connection to the past. But the records cannot tell them everything. They can say who the child was. They can say where the child came from. They can say who the parents were. But they cannot always answer the most painful question. Are the parents alive? That question must be answered another way. Through searches, through survivors, through relatives, through people who remember. Sometimes the answer is good. Sometimes it is devastating. Imagine a child who has spent years believing that one day their mother will return. Now someone tells them the war is over. The child asks, "Can I go home?" For some, the answer is yes. For others, there is no home left. This is the cruelest part of survival. The child has escaped the Holocaust, but the Holocaust has not completely left the child. You can survive the war and still spend the rest of your life searching for the people you lost. Some children are reunited with relatives, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a grandparent. Sometimes the reunion is filled with tears. Sometimes the child barely recognizes the person standing in front of them. Years have passed. Faces have changed. Children have grown. Adults have aged. The memories are incomplete. But then, someone says the old name, and suddenly, something inside the child remembers. A voice, a face, a room, a smell, a song, a moment from before the war. The past returns in fragments, but not every story ends that way. For many children, the search leads nowhere. Their parents were murdered, their homes were destroyed, their relatives disappeared. There is no one left to return to. These children must build a life from almost nothing. They have survived, but survival has made them orphans. Irina sees this. She understands that saving a child from death does not guarantee happiness. It simply gives the child the possibility of a future. That possibility matters, but it comes with grief. You imagine one of the children looking through old papers. There is a name, a family name, a birthplace. The child reads it. Perhaps it feels strange. Perhaps it feels familiar. Perhaps the child has spent years being someone else. Now, for the first time, the old identity is being returned. The records become more than historical documents. They become pieces of a life, a connection to parents who may no longer be alive, a reminder that the child existed before the war, that they were loved, that they belonged somewhere, that they had a family, and perhaps that is what Irina was protecting all along. Not only bodies, memory, identity, human dignity. The Nazis had tried to reduce human beings to categories, numbers, transport lists, prisoners, victims. But these records said something different. This child had a name. This child had parents. This child had a home. This child had a life. And someone remembered. The work of finding survivors continues. Irina helps where she can. But she cannot undo the destruction. She cannot bring back the dead. She cannot rebuild every home. She cannot erase every child's memories of fear. What she can do is help preserve the truth. The children grow older. Some leave Poland, some remain. Some are adopted. Some are raised by relatives. Their lives take different paths. But beneath those different lives, there is one shared fact. They survived. And they survived because ordinary people decided to act. The world outside Warsaw is also changing. The Holocaust is becoming one of the defining horrors of the 20th century, but immediately after the war, many survivors struggle to make others understand what happened. The numbers are enormous. The destruction is difficult to comprehend. 6 million Jewish people were murdered. Entire communities disappeared. In Warsaw, one of Europe's largest Jewish communities before the war, was almost completely destroyed. Against that enormous loss, the children saved by Irina may seem like a small number, but history is not only measured by scale. One life is not a small thing to the person living it. One child is an entire universe to a parent. One name can represent a family. One survivor can carry memories that would otherwise disappear. That is why the records matter. That is why the children matter. And that is why Irina's work matters. You return to the image of the jars. For years, they were buried underground. Nobody could see them. Nobody could hear them. But they survived. And when they were opened, the names came back. A little boy, a little girl, a family, a birthplace, a forgotten identity. The papers had waited through the darkness. Now they could speak. But there is another truth. The people who were saved didn't all know who saved them. Some were too young. Some remembered only fragments. Some grew up believing their rescuers were simply family. Others knew that someone had protected them, but did not know the full story. The rescuer may have disappeared into the background. The child grew up, built a life, had children, grandchildren, and carried a story they did not completely understand. Irina herself did not become famous immediately. For years, her work remained largely unknown outside a relatively small circle. She did not spend her life demanding recognition. She had done what she believed had to be done. Save the children. Remember their names. Protect their future. That was enough. But history has a strange way of returning to the people it once overlooked. Decades would pass. The children would become adults. Some would tell their stories, others would remain silent, and eventually, the world would begin asking, who was the woman who helped save them? The answer would lead back to Warsaw, back to the wall, back to the frightened families, back to the small pieces of paper, back to the jars beneath the earth, and back to one woman who had once looked at a child in danger and decided she could not simply walk away. But before the world fully understood her story, there was still one painful truth waiting. Many of the children would never be able to return to their old lives. They had survived, but the world they remembered had largely disappeared, and so their next journey would not be toward the past. It would be toward a future they would have to build themselves. The war is over. The streets are quieter now, but inside the minds of the children, the war continues. You might imagine that once the soldiers leave, once the walls come down, once the guns become silent, everything becomes normal again. But it doesn't. Not immediately. Sometimes not even after decades. A child who has survived a war does not simply wake up one morning and become ordinary again. They carry memories. Some are clear, some are broken. Some are buried so deeply that they may not return for many years. A child's memory might be a mother's voice, a doorway, a blanket, a face, a smell, a song, a name, or perhaps nothing at all. And that absence can be just as painful. You're standing in post-war Warsaw. The city is rebuilding itself. People are clearing rubble. Walls are being repaired. New lives are beginning. But for the Jewish survivors, the question is much more complicated. Where do you belong when the community you belong to has almost disappeared? Before the war, Warsaw had been home to a huge Jewish population. There were schools, synagogues, markets, businesses, families, children playing in streets, people arguing, people laughing, people living ordinary lives. Then the Holocaust came, and almost all of it was destroyed. The children who survived are now growing up in a world that no longer resembles the one they remember. Some are living with relatives, some are in institutions, some are being cared for by people who hid them, some are preparing to leave Poland, and some don't know where they belong. You imagine one of the rescued children looking at an old photograph. There is a family standing together, a mother, a father, children. Everyone's smiling. The photograph is small, the faces are young. The child looks at it for a long time. Perhaps she recognizes herself. Perhaps she recognizes only one person. Perhaps she recognizes no one. The photograph is proof that the family existed, proof that the child once belonged somewhere, and sometimes that is all that remains. The hidden records help restore some of those connections, but the process is difficult. Names have changed, documents have disappeared, people have moved, some survivors have left the country, some families have been completely destroyed. Finding someone can take months, sometimes years, sometimes the search never succeeds. And that is one of the hardest realities of this story. Irina could save a child. She could arrange a hiding place. She could preserve a name. But she could not control what happened to the child's family. She could not stop the trains. She could not bring back those who had been murdered. She could not rebuild every destroyed home. She could only protect the life that was still possible to protect. And that is what she had done. Thousands of times, one child at a time. The children grow older. Some begin asking questions. Who am I? Why did I have another name? Why did I live with that family? Where are my parents? Why did nobody tell me? Sometimes the answers are painful. Adults may hesitate. They may fear that the truth will hurt the child, but eventually the truth has to be faced. You were hidden. You were given another identity. Your parents wanted you to survive. Someone risked their life to save you. And perhaps your parents did not survive. There is no easy way to hear those words, especially when you're still young. Imagine discovering that the people you spent years hoping to see again are gone. The war has ended, but grief has just begun. Some survivors experience another painful feeling. Guilt. Why did I survive when they did not? Why me? Why was I saved? Why did someone else's child disappear? These are questions that have no simple answers. The people who saved the children never claimed that survival was fair. It wasn't. It was chance, circumstance, courage, and sometimes a stranger's decision. A door opened, a hiding place available, a guard who looked away, a rescuer who took a risk, one small difference, and a life could change completely. The children who survived therefore carried something enormous, not only their own memories, but the memory of people who did not survive. A child who grew into an adult might remember a friend from the ghetto, a brother, a sister, a cousin, someone who once stood beside them, someone who disappeared. Their survival became a kind of responsibility, to remember, to speak, to tell the story, but not everyone could speak. Some survivors were silent for decades. The memories were too painful. The world around them was changing. New wars, new countries, new lives. People wanted to move forward. But history does not always allow people to leave the past behind. Sometimes the past waits quietly, then returns. A smell, a photograph, a name, a familiar song. Suddenly, you're a child again. Back in Warsaw, back behind the wall, back beside your mother, back before everything changed. Irina's work had preserved something essential. The children's names, their identities, their connection to their families. She could not restore their childhood, but she could help ensure that their childhood was not erased. That mattered, because the Nazis had attempted to erase more than people. They attempted to erase identity, community, memory, history. The hidden names were a quiet refusal. No, you existed. You had a name. You had a family. You mattered. The children eventually become adults. Some marry, some have children, some build lives in other countries, their own children grow up. And sometimes the grandchildren hear stories, at first perhaps only fragments. My mother had another name. My family came from Warsaw. Someone hid me during the war. There was a woman who helped us. The grandchildren ask questions. Who was she? What did she do? How did you survive? And slowly, the story begins moving from one generation to another. That is how memory survives. Not through monuments alone, not through books alone, but through people telling other people what happened. A child becomes an adult becomes a parent tells a child, and the story continues. Irina's name slowly begins to emerge from the shadows. People start recognizing what she did. The number of children she helped becomes known. The stories become clearer. And the woman who once moved quietly through Warsaw begins to be remembered. But Irina herself remains remarkably humble. She does not present herself as a hero. She often emphasizes the people who worked with her, the network, the families, the institutions, the ordinary people who took enormous risks, because she knows the truth. She did not save those children alone. There were many hands, many doors, many people who said yes when saying yes was dangerous. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful parts of the story. History often remembers one name, but behind that name, there are many unnamed people. People who opened their homes, people who carried children, people who forged documents, people who hid papers, people who kept secrets, people who looked at a frightened child and chose to help. The children survived because of a network of courage, and now their lives are evidence that the network succeeded. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for thousands of children to grow up. Enough for families to continue. Enough for stories to be told. Enough for the world to remember. Years pass. The children become old. Their memories become precious. Some return to Warsaw. Some visit places connected to their childhood. A street, a building, a cemetery, a place where a family once lived. They stand there quietly. The city has changed. But memory can make the old world appear again. For a moment, they are children. And perhaps they think about the person who carried them through danger, the person who gave them another name, the person who remembered their real name, Irina, a woman they may have known only briefly, but whose decision changed the entire course of their lives, and eventually, the world begins to understand. The story was never simply about one woman. It was about what human beings can choose to do when the world tells them that another person's life does not matter. Irina chose differently. She believed that every child mattered, every name mattered, every life mattered. And now, decades after the war, the children she helped are living proof. The war tried to erase them. It failed. The walls tried to contain them. They escaped. The Nazis tried to destroy their identities. Someone wrote their names down, and those names survived. But there is still one final question. Why did Irina do it? What made an ordinary woman decide that the lives of strangers were worth risking everything for? The answer is not hidden in a weapon, or a political speech, or a grand military victory. It is hidden in something much smaller. A child, a frightened child, standing in front of her, and Irina deciding that she could not walk away. For many years, almost nobody outside a small circle knew the full story. The children had grown up. The war had become history. Warsaw had rebuilt itself. New generations had been born. And yet, the names remained. The memories remained. And somewhere beneath those memories was the story of a woman who had once walked through the Warsaw ghetto, carrying hope in a world where hope seemed almost impossible. Her name was Irina Sendler. But history did not immediately make her famous. For years after the war, she continued living a relatively quiet life. She worked. She cared for people. She raised a family. She lived through the political changes that followed the war. The world moved forward, but the children she had helped never disappeared from her memory. Neither did the ones she could not save. You can imagine what that must have been like, to know that thousands survived because of the work you had done, while also knowing that millions did not. To remember the faces of children and wonder what became of them. To remember parents who had placed their greatest treasure in your hands and never know whether they had survived. History often gives us clean endings. The war ends. The heroes are recognized. The survivors rebuild. But real life is rarely so neat. For Irina, the war did not simply become a chapter that could be closed. It remained part of her. And for the children, it remained part of them too. Decades passed. The children became adults. Some began telling their stories. Slowly, people outside their families began to hear about the woman who had helped them. But the story still remained largely unknown. Then something unexpected happened. A group of students in the United States discovered her story. They were studying the Holocaust. They came across references to a Polish woman who had helped save thousands of Jewish children. At first, the number seemed almost unbelievable. Thousands of children. How? Who was she? Why had they never heard her name? The students began researching. They found more information. They learned about Warsaw, the ghetto, the underground network, the children, the false identities, the hidden records, the jars, the arrest, the torture, the death sentence, and the escape. The more they learned, the more they wanted others to know. They began creating a school project based on her life. What had been nearly forgotten started becoming a story shared with a new generation. And something beautiful happened. The story crossed borders. People who had never heard Irina's name began hearing it. Students began asking questions. Teachers began teaching the story. Survivors began sharing memories. And the world slowly started looking back toward Warsaw, not simply at the destruction, but at the courage that existed inside it. You can imagine Irina hearing that young people were learning about her. Perhaps she found it surprising. She had never believed that she was doing something extraordinary. She had simply believed that children needed help. But the world was beginning to understand something. History is not only made by presidents, not only by generals, not only by armies. Sometimes history is changed by someone who opens a door, someone who carries a child, someone who writes down a name, someone who refuses to forget. The students who discovered her story became part of that memory. They helped bring her work into the light. And suddenly, people began asking another question. How many children had she helped? The number commonly associated with her rescue work is around 2,500 Jewish children. 2,500. It sounds enormous. But Irina always understood the number differently, not as a statistic, as individual lives, a boy, a girl, a baby, a teenager, a child who loved music, a child who was afraid of the dark, a child who missed his mother, a child who grew up and became a parent. 2,500 futures, 2,500 stories that might otherwise have ended differently. And still, Irina did not claim all the credit. She spoke about the people who worked with her, the families who hid children, the institutions that accepted them, the people who forged documents, the people who transported them, the people who kept secrets. She understood that courage had many faces. Some names were remembered, many were not, but all of them mattered. The world eventually recognized Irina. She received honors. Her story became part of Holocaust education. Survivors spoke about her. Young people learned her name. And the woman who had once worked in secret became a symbol of moral courage. But perhaps the most important thing was not the awards. It was the children. They had survived. They had grown old. They had families. They had children and grandchildren. Their lives continued. Every time a survivor told their story, Irina's work continued. Every time a child of a survivor learned about their family, the memory continued. Every time someone heard the question, "What would you have done?" the story became relevant again. Because that is the uncomfortable power of history. It does not only ask what happened, it asks what we would do. Imagine yourself standing in Warsaw in 1942. You see the wall, you hear the rumours, you see hungry children, you know the danger, you know that helping them could cost you your freedom, perhaps your life. Would you step forward? Would you open your door? Would you carry a child? Would you keep a secret? Would you risk everything for someone whose name you did not even know? There is no easy answer, and perhaps that is why Irina's story continues to touch people. Because she was not a mythical figure. She was a human being. She was afraid. She lived under an oppressive occupation. She understood the consequences, and she acted anyway. Her courage was not the absence of fear. It was a choice made despite fear, and that choice began with something very simple. A child needed help, so she helped. Then another child needed help. She helped again, then another, and another, until one day the number had become thousands. But even then, the principle remained the same. One child matters. One name matters. One life matters. The hidden jars are perhaps the most powerful symbol of her story. For years, they were buried. The world above them was changing. Wars ended, governments changed, children became adults, buildings were rebuilt. But beneath the ground, the names waited. The Nazis had wanted people to disappear without a trace. The jars quietly refused that. They said, you existed, you had a name, you belonged to someone, you were loved, you were remembered. And when those names finally came back into the light, they became more than pieces of paper. They became witnesses. Witnesses to lives that had survived. Witnesses to families that had been destroyed. Witnesses to the people who had chosen courage. Irina lived long enough to see the world remember. She lived to see the children become adults. She lived to see her story reach people far beyond Poland. And perhaps that was one of the greatest rewards possible. Not fame, not medals, but knowing that the children were still here, still living, still telling the story, still carrying the names, still proving that the attempt to erase them had failed. Irina Sendler died in Warsaw in 2008. She was 98 years old. By then, the world knew her name. But perhaps the most fitting way to remember her is not as a legend, but as a woman who once faced an impossible situation and made a choice. She could not save everyone. She knew that. But she refused to let that fact become an excuse for saving no one. So she saved the people she could, one by one, and sometimes. That is what courage looks like. Not changing the entire world at once, just refusing to abandon the person standing in front of you. The children grew old, their children grew old, their grandchildren were born. And the story continued moving from one generation to another. A story that began behind a wall, eventually crossed the entire world. And now, you have reached the final question. Not what Irina did. We know that. Not how many children survived. We know that too. The question is, what remains after a life like hers? What does one person leave behind? The answer may be simpler than we expect. A name, a memory, a child who survived, and a reminder that even in the darkest chapter of human history, someone can still choose to be human. The city is quiet now. The walls are gone. The soldiers are gone. The checkpoints are gone. The children are no longer being carried through dark streets under assumed names. The jars have been opened. The names have returned to the light. And somewhere, an old woman is remembering. She remembers the streets of Warsaw. She remembers the fear. She remembers the families. She remembers the children. Perhaps she remembers one child more clearly than another. A little hand holding hers, a frightened face looking up, a mother standing in a doorway, a father trying not to cry, a whispered name, a final goodbye. These moments happened decades ago, but memory does not always obey time. Sometimes, a moment from 50 years ago can feel closer than yesterday. For Irina Sendler, the children were never just a number. They were never simply 2,500. They were individual lives. And perhaps that is the most important thing to understand. When history gives us enormous numbers, we can become numb. Millions, thousands, hundreds. The mind cannot easily imagine that many individual human beings. But one child, we can imagine. One frightened child. One mother. One goodbye. One person choosing to help. That is where this story begins, and that is where it ends, with one child. You can imagine that child standing beside Irina. The city is dangerous. The future is unknown. The child does not understand why everything has changed, but Irina takes the child's hand and they walk. That simple action becomes an act of resistance. The Nazis wanted to decide who deserved to live. They wanted to destroy Jewish families. They wanted to erase Jewish identity. They wanted people to disappear without memory. But Irina and the people around her refused to accept that. They did not have an army. They did not control the government. They did not have the power to stop the war. What they had was the ability to help one person, then another, then another. And that was enough to change thousands of lives. The children grew up. Some became parents. Some became grandparents. Some lived far from Poland. Some remained connected to the places where they had survived. But all of them carried something forward. A memory, a name, a story. Sometimes. The memory was painful. Sometimes incomplete. Sometimes almost impossible to speak about. But it survived. And that is important. Because memory is fragile. Buildings can disappear. Documents can burn. Photographs can be lost. People can die. but a story passed from one generation to another can continue. A survivor tells a child, that child grows up, then tells another child, and suddenly, something that happened nearly a century ago is still alive in someone's mind. That is how history survives. Not only in museums, not only in books, but in people, in voices, in memories, in names. The jars buried beneath the ground are a powerful symbol because they contain exactly that. Names, small pieces of paper, nothing that looks powerful. And yet, those pieces of paper carried the identities of children the Nazis wanted to erase. The jars waited, through war, through destruction, through political change, through decades, and when they were finally opened, the names came back. Imagine that moment. A hand reaches into the earth, the jar is lifted, the lid is opened. Inside, a collection of names, names that had been hidden during the darkest years, names that had survived. Perhaps someone reads one aloud, and suddenly, a child who had once been hidden becomes visible again. A name becomes a person becomes a family becomes a story, and the story becomes memory. That is what Irina protected. Not only life, but identity. Not only survival, but remembrance. She could not undo the Holocaust. Nobody could. She could not bring back the dead. She could not restore every destroyed family. She could not return every child to the home they remembered. But she could say, "You are still here. Your name still exists. Your life still matters, and someone remembers." Perhaps that is why her story remains so powerful, because it does not tell us that one person can fix everything. It tells us something more realistic, and perhaps more important. One person can still make a difference, even when the situation is impossible, even when the odds are terrible, even when you cannot save everyone. You can save someone. You can open a door. You can offer food. You can protect a secret. You can remember a name. You can refuse to participate in cruelty. You can choose humanity. And sometimes, one choice creates another. One person helps a child. That child survives. That child grows up. That child has children. Those children grow up. And generations later, the life that was almost destroyed continues. A single act of courage can travel farther than the person who performed it ever knows. Irina Sendler lived to see some of that. She lived long enough to know that the children survived. She lived long enough to see her story become known. She lived long enough to understand that the world had not forgotten. And perhaps that was enough. She died in Warsaw in 2008. She was 98 years old. Her life had stretched across nearly an entire century. She had witnessed war, occupation, destruction, political upheaval, rebuilding, and eventually remembrance. But the image that remains is not an old woman receiving an award. It is not a photograph. It is not a number. It is a hand, a child's hand, inside hers, walking away from the wall, walking away from the ghetto, walking toward an uncertain future. The child does not know what is waiting. Irina does not know either, but they keep walking, and perhaps that is the final lesson. Sometimes, you do not need to know how the story will end. You only need to know what the next right thing is. Take the child's hand, keep walking, protect the name, hide the record, open the door, help the next person, and then the next. The world around you may still be dark, but darkness does not make kindness meaningless. In fact, it can make kindness more visible. A small light is easiest to see in darkness, and Irina's life was filled with small lights. One child, one family, one hiding place, one secret, one name, one life, then another, until thousands were alive who might otherwise have been lost. So when you think about this story, do not think only about the horror. Remember the courage too. Remember the mothers who made impossible sacrifices. Remember the fathers who trusted strangers. Remember the families who opened their doors. Remember the people who carried children through danger. Remember the people who kept secrets. Remember the people who wrote down names. Remember the children who survived. And remember Irina. Not because she was perfect, not because she could save everyone, but because when she saw suffering, she chose not to look away. The world will always contain moments when people are told that someone else does not matter. History has shown us where that thinking can lead, but history has also shown us another possibility. Someone can say, no, this person matters, this child matters, this name matters, this life matters, and then they can act. That is what Irina did, and that is why the name survived. The war ended, the wall disappeared, the children grew old, but the story remained. And now, it has reached you. Maybe you are listening late at night. Maybe the room around you is quiet. Maybe the world outside has finally gone still. Take a slow breath. Let the story settle for a moment. Imagine Warsaw long ago. The cold streets, the dark windows, the wall, the footsteps. And then, a small hand reaching for another hand, a child being led away from danger, a name being written down, a jar being placed beneath the earth, a promise being made. We will remember you. You will not disappear. And perhaps that is the quietest form of victory. Not defeating an army, not winning a battle, but refusing to allow a human life to be erased. One child, one name, one life, and then another, and another. Until the darkness could no longer claim them all. The story ends here, but the memory does not, because somewhere, a survivor's family is still living. A child who once needed to be rescued became an adult. That adult became a parent. Their children grew up. Their grandchildren were born. And the life that the Nazis tried to destroy continued. That is the final answer. They lived. They remembered. They carried the names forward. And because they did, the world remembers too. So tonight, as you let the story fade into the quiet, remember one simple thing. History is made not only by the people who hold power, but also by the people who decide what they will do with the small amount of power they have. Sometimes, all you have is a hand to offer. Offer it. All you have is a name to remember. Remember it. All you have is one person standing in front of you. Help them. Because you may never know how far that single act will travel. And you may never know how many generations will exist. Because you chose not to walk away.